I'm Chelsea, a 27-year-old financial advisor from Seattle. I've always been the responsible one in my family, especially when it came to money. My mother has a long history of financial irresponsibility that I've spent my entire adult life trying to overcome. Nothing could have prepared me for checking my account that Monday morning and discovering $17,000 missing. The betrayal cut deeper knowing it was my own mother who took it. That confrontation at the airport would change our relationship forever. If you're watching this video, drop a comment letting me know where you're from and hit that subscribe button for more stories about family betrayal and learning to stand up for yourself. Growing up with my mother, Janet, was like riding a financial roller coaster. One month, we'd have plenty of money for brand name clothes, and eating out the next, we'd be scrounging for change in the couch cushions to buy milk. This unpredictable pattern became our normal, and as a child, I never fully understood why. My father worked steadily as a construction foreman, bringing home a consistent paycheck every 2 weeks. In my young mind, I couldn't comprehend why money was such a constant source of tension in our household. I would often overhear their late-night arguments about credit card bills and overdraft fees. "You spent how much on what?" My father would demand, his voice rising with each word. "We don't have this kind of money, Janet." My mother would respond defensively. "The kids needed new clothes for school," or "the refrigerator was empty," though I later realized many of her purchases had nothing to do with necessity. When I was 12, my father finally reached his breaking point. After discovering my mother had secretly taken out a second mortgage on our home to cover her shopping debts, he filed for divorce. I still remember the night he sat my brother Thomas and me down to explain he was leaving. "I love you both so much," he said, voice cracking, "but I can't keep living like this. Your mother and I have different ideas about money, and I can't fix it anymore." Within a year, my father moved to Florida for a fresh start. While he sent child support religiously, that money seldom seemed to improve our situation. My mother's spending habits only worsened without my father's oversight. She'd receive his check on Friday, and by Monday, we'd be back to eating ramen noodles for dinner. Thomas, 5 years younger than me, seemed oblivious to our financial reality. But I absorbed every lesson from watching my mother's mistakes. By 14, I was babysitting after school and on weekends stashing my earnings in a lockbox hidden in my closet. My mother occasionally borrowed from my savings when she found it always promising to pay me back, but rarely following through. In high school, I became obsessed with earning scholarships. My guidance counselor, Mrs. Franklin, noticed my determination and took me under her wing. She helped me apply for every opportunity available, and by graduation, I had secured enough funding to cover most of my tuition at Washington State University. College wasn't easy. While other students enjoyed the full campus experience, I worked 3 part-time jobs between classes. I served breakfast at a diner from 5 to 9 in the morning, worked at the campus library between classes, and waited tables at an Italian restaurant on weekends. Every dollar I earned went toward covering what my scholarships didn't: books, housing, and living expenses. My roommate Megan would often invite me to weekend parties or spring break trips, but I always declined. "Come on, Chelsea, you can afford one night of fun," she would plead. "I really can't," I would respond, already calculating how many extra shifts I would need to cover next semester's expenses. While most of my peers were accumulating student loan debt, I graduated debt-free with a degree in finance and a minor in psychology. Understanding money was one thing, but I wanted to understand the psychological aspects of financial behavior too, perhaps to make sense of my mother's relationship with money. After graduation, I landed an entry-level position at a financial advisory firm in Seattle. Starting in a new city with no safety net was terrifying, but the distance from my mother's financial chaos felt necessary for my own well-being. I rented a tiny studio apartment and furnished it with secondhand items, saving aggressively from each paycheck. Meanwhile, Thomas remained with our mother, now entering his teen years, and developing spending habits that mirrored hers. I would call weekly, trying to impart financial wisdom from afar, but my advice often fell on deaf ears. At 16, Thomas got his first job at a local grocery store, but his paychecks disappeared as quickly as they arrived, spent on video games and designer sneakers. Despite my determination to maintain financial independence from my mother, I couldn't completely sever our connection. Janet would call periodically, usually when rent was due, or a utility was about to be disconnected. Against my better judgment, I would send money telling myself it was to help Thomas not enable my mother. 3 years into my career, after I'd been promoted twice and established a solid emergency fund, my mother called with what she described as a serious emergency. Her car had broken down, and she needed $2,000 for repairs so she could get to work. After wiring the money, I discovered she had used it for a weekend spa getaway with her new boyfriend Richard, whom she'd met at a casino. That betrayal led to our first major confrontation about money as adults. "You lied to me," I said when I confronted her over the phone. "You said it was for car repairs." "Well, my car is fixed now too," she replied defensively. "But I needed that break for my mental health. You don't understand the stress I'm under." After that incident, I made a difficult decision. I set up a joint checking account with a $5,000 balance and told her it was only for genuine emergencies involving her or Thomas. I made her promise to call me before using any of the funds and to provide documentation for any expenses. "This is insulting," she complained. "I'm your mother, not a child." "This isn't about trust, Mom," I lied. "It's about creating financial boundaries that work for both of us." For almost 2 years, the system worked reasonably well. The account was used sparingly for legitimate expenses, car repairs, a medical bill for Thomas, and once when their heating went out in winter. Each time Janet called first and provided receipts afterward. By 27, I had worked my way up to becoming a full financial advisor, specializing in helping women establish financial independence. The irony wasn't lost on me that I spent my days teaching others what I had learned from my mother's negative example. My clients would often comment on my passion for financial education. "You explain these concepts like someone who really understands what's at stake," one client told me after I helped her create her first budget. "Financial security isn't just about money," I would respond. "It's about freedom and peace of mind." This past spring, my hard work paid off with a significant promotion. My boss called me into his office on a Friday afternoon, congratulating me on bringing in more new clients than anyone else in the firm's history for a first-year advisor. "We're increasing your base salary and giving you a performance bonus," he announced, sliding a letter across his desk. I nearly gasped when I saw the figure $25,000, more money than I had ever seen at once in my life. After taxes, it would be enough for a down payment on a small condo in the Seattle suburbs, something I had been dreaming about for years. That weekend, I allowed myself the rare luxury of imagining my future home. I browsed real estate listings online, calculating mortgage payments and property taxes. For the first time since childhood, I felt financially secure. The bonus would be deposited the following Friday, and I planned to transfer most of it to my high-yield savings account immediately, leaving just enough in checking to cover my normal monthly expenses. Little did I know that my careful planning was about to be completely upended by the person who should have been most proud of my financial success. The morning that changed everything started like any other Monday. I woke at 5:30, went for a quick run around my neighborhood, showered, and made a protein smoothie for breakfast. Before heading to the office, I sat down at my small kitchen table to check my bank accounts and credit card balances, a habit as routine to me as brushing my teeth. I opened my banking app and stared at the screen in disbelief. My main checking account, which should have contained well over $30,000, including my recent bonus, showed a balance of just $13,000. I refreshed the app thinking it must be a glitch. The balance remained unchanged. My heart began racing. I felt a cold sweat break out across my forehead and my hands started shaking so badly I dropped my phone. This had to be a mistake. I picked up my phone again and navigated to the transaction history. There, spread across the last 2 weeks, were multiple transfers to the joint account I shared with my mother. 5 separate transfers, $3,000, $5,000, $2,000, $4,000, and $3,000. A total of $17,000 taken without my knowledge or consent. The room started spinning. I felt nauseated and had to put my head between my knees to keep from passing out. I couldn't breathe. This was identity theft. It had to be. Someone had hacked my account. Once I could stand, I immediately called the bank's fraud department. I was on hold for 22 excruciating minutes before a representative named Marcus answered. "I need to report unauthorized transfers from my account," I said, my voice trembling. $17,000 is missing. Marcus asked me several verification questions before pulling up my transaction history. I see the transfers you're referring to, he said after a moment. But Ms. Bennett, these transfers appear to have been made using your online banking credentials from your usual IP address. That's impossible, I insisted. I never authorized these transfers. One moment, let me look at something else, Marcus said. I could hear him typing. The transfers were made to a joint account on which you are listed as a primary account holder. The other account holder is Janet Bennett. Is that correct? My blood ran cold. That's my mother, but I never made those transfers. Could she have accessed my account? More typing. Does your mother know your online banking password or have access to your devices? I thought back to my mother's visit 2 months earlier. She had stayed at my apartment for a weekend, claiming she wanted to spend time together in the city. There had been a moment when she asked to use my laptop because her phone wasn't working properly. Had she somehow seen my saved passwords then, she might have, I admitted, feeling sick with realization. Ms. Bennett, what you're describing isn't technically fraud, since this person is an authorized user on the destination account. It's more of a family dispute. I recommend you contact your mother and then possibly seek legal advice if the transfers weren't authorized. After ending the call, I immediately tried calling my mother. The call went straight to voicemail. I texted her, "Mom, I need to talk to you immediately about money missing from my account. Call me ASAP." I tried calling again 5 minutes later. Again, straight to voicemail. I called Thomas next, but he didn't answer either. I left a voicemail asking him to have Mom call me right away. Frantic and running late for work, I sent another text to my mother. "This is serious. $17,000 is missing from my account. I need to know what's going on or I'll have to report it to the police." Minutes later, my phone pinged with a response from Thomas, not my mother. "Chelsea, chill out. Mom's planning a surprise. Don't ruin it." A surprise? What kind of surprise would require $17,000 of my money? I arrived at work distracted and anxious. Between client meetings, I kept checking my phone for responses. Around noon, I received another text from Thomas. "We're having an amazing time. Mom says she'll explain everything when we get back. Don't worry so much." Attached to the message was a photo. My stomach dropped as I stared at it. The picture showed Thomas, my mother, and Richard smiling broadly on a white sand beach, palm trees swaying in the background. They were holding tropical drinks with little umbrellas, looking carefree and happy. With shaking fingers, I opened Instagram. My mother rarely posted, but sure enough, her most recent post from 2 days ago showed her tagged at the Grand Wailea Resort in Maui, Hawaii. The caption read, "Finally taking that dream vacation. Life is too short not to enjoy paradise." There were more photos in the same location from the previous week. One showed my mother and Richard at a luau. Another featured Thomas swimming with dolphins. The most recent was a selfie of all three of them in a helicopter with the caption, "Helicopter tour of the islands today. So blessed to experience this." I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. They were taking a luxury Hawaiian vacation with my money, my bonus that I had worked so hard for. The down payment for my future home was being spent on helicopter tours and dolphin swims. The betrayal was so profound I couldn't process it. This wasn't just a misunderstanding or a small loan taken without asking. This was theft on a massive scale from her own daughter. And she had involved Thomas in the deception, having him message me about a surprise, while they lived it up in Hawaii with my hard-earned money. I closed my office door and broke down in tears. Years of building financial security, of working multiple jobs, of saying no to my own wants and needs, to save for the future, all undermined in an instant by the person who should have been teaching me financial responsibility in the first place. The mixture of emotions was overwhelming: betrayal, rage, helplessness, and underneath it all, a deep sadness. How could she do this to me? What kind of mother steals from her own child? And what was I supposed to do now, as I sat at my desk staring blankly at my computer screen? One thought crystallized through the emotional fog. This wasn't just wrong, it was illegal, and I couldn't let it continue for another day. That night was the longest of my life. I tossed and turned, my mind racing through possible courses of action. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the image of my mother, Thomas, and Richard laughing on that beach, spending my money without a care in the world. Around 2 in the morning, I gave up on sleep and called Megan, my best friend since college. She answered groggily, but became fully alert as I explained the situation through tears. "That's not just inappropriate, Chelsea. That's criminal," she said firmly. "You need to stop this immediately before they spend even more." "But they're in Hawaii," I replied. "What if I strand them there? Thomas is only 19. He didn't ask for any of this." "Your mother is an adult who made a conscious decision to steal from you," Megan countered. "Thomas is old enough to understand right from wrong, too. Actions have consequences, and they need to learn that." After we hung up, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of tea weighing my options. I could wait until they returned and confront them then, but how much more of my money would disappear in the meantime? The transfers had been increasing in size and frequency. What if they emptied my account entirely? At 8 in the morning, I called David Kim, a colleague who specialized in fraud cases. I explained my situation without mentioning it was my mother involved. "What are my options if someone transfers money from my personal account to a joint account without my authorization?" I asked. "First, you should freeze the joint account immediately," David advised. "That will prevent any further withdrawals. Then you should file a police report for unauthorized access to your personal accounts." "Even if I know the person?" I asked hesitantly. David paused. "Is this a family matter, Chelsea?" When I didn't respond, he continued gently. "Financial abuse by family members is more common than people realize. You have every right to protect your assets regardless of who took them." After our call, I made my decision. I would freeze the joint account. It felt like a dramatic step, but what choice did I have? They had already taken $17,000. How much more would satisfy them? I called the bank again this time, speaking to a manager named Sandra. I explained the situation in detail, including the fact that the person making unauthorized transfers was my mother. "I understand this is a difficult situation," Sandra said sympathetically. "As a primary account holder on the joint account, you have the right to freeze it. However, I should warn you that your mother, as the other primary holder, could unfreeze it by visiting a branch in person with proper identification." "She's currently in Hawaii," I replied. "By the time she could visit a branch, I'll have had time to address this with her directly." "Very well," Sandra said. "I can place a temporary freeze on the account effective immediately. This will halt any pending transactions and prevent new withdrawals or transfers." "What about transactions that have already been processed?" I asked. "Those funds are already gone, I'm afraid. You'd need to pursue legal action to recover them." After confirming my identity again, Sandra placed the freeze. "It's done," she said. "The account is now frozen. Any attempt to use the associated debit card will be declined, and no withdrawals or transfers can be processed." I felt a momentary rush of satisfaction knowing that the spending spree was over. No more helicopter tours or luxury resort expenses on my dime. But that feeling quickly gave way to anxiety. What would happen when they tried to pay for something and their card was declined? How would they react? Would they be stranded? As I contemplated these questions, my phone pinged with a text message from Thomas. "We decided to extend our stay another week. The resort had a cancellation for one of their best suites. Mom says it was meant to be another week." They were planning to stay another week and upgrade to a better suite, undoubtedly expecting my account to fund this extended luxury vacation. My momentary doubt vanished, replaced by certainty that I had made the right decision. Still, as I prepared for work that morning, I couldn't shake the uneasiness. I had never taken such a drastic step against my family before. Was I overreacting? No, I told myself firmly. $17,000 wasn't a misunderstanding. It was theft, plain and simple. I tried to focus on work that day, but my mind kept wandering to Hawaii, imagining the moment they would discover the card was declined. Would it be at dinner? At the front desk when trying to extend their stay? During an attempt to book another expensive excursion? As much as I tried to suppress it, a small part of me was looking forward to that moment of realization. After years of cleaning up my mother's financial messes, maybe this time she would finally understand there were consequences to her actions. Little did I know the consequences would come swiftly, and the fallout would be far more explosive than I had anticipated. The first call came at exactly 7:43 p.m. that evening, just as I was heating up leftover pasta for dinner. My mother's name flashed on my phone screen, and I took a deep breath before answering. Hello. What the hell did you do? My mother's voice was shrill with anger. Our card was just declined at dinner. We're sitting here humiliated in front of the entire restaurant. I froze the account, I replied, struggling to keep my voice steady. The account you've been using to spend my money without permission. Your money? She scoffed. That's our emergency account. No, Mom. You transferred $17,000 from my personal account into that joint account without my knowledge or permission. That's theft. There was a moment of silence before she exploded again. How dare you accuse me of stealing after everything I've done for you? I raised you as a single mother, sacrificing everything. That doesn't give you the right to take my money. I insisted. I worked hard for that bonus. It was going to be a down payment on my first home. Oh, please, she sneered. You're young. You have plenty of time to save for a house. We needed this vacation. Do you have any idea how stressful my life has been? Before I could respond, she hung up. I stood in my kitchen, shaking with anger and hurt. 10 minutes later, Richard called. I almost didn't answer, but decided it was better to face the situation head on. Chelsea, this is completely unacceptable, he said without preamble. Do you have any idea how embarrassing it was to have our card declined? The waiter took it away in front of everyone. What's unacceptable is stealing $17,000, I countered. Your mother didn't steal anything, Richard defended. She was planning to surprise you. We left you a plane ticket to join us for the last weekend. A plane ticket with my own money? I asked incredulously. That's not how gifts work, Richard. You're being incredibly selfish, he said. Your mother deserves this break. She's been through a lot. So have I nearly shouted. And now I'm out $17,000 that I earned. Richard's tone turned threatening. If you don't unfreeze this account immediately, you're going to regret it. Family doesn't do this to family. After he hung up, I received a text from Thomas that made my blood run cold. I can't believe you do this to Mom after everything she's been through. Did you know she's in remission? This trip was to celebrate her beating cancer. Way to ruin the one good thing in her life. Cancer remission. This was the first I'd heard of any illness. My mother had never mentioned being sick, let alone having cancer. Was Thomas telling the truth? Or was this another manipulation tactic? Before I could process this new information, my phone rang again. It was Mrs. Winters, my elderly neighbor. Chelsea, dear, your mother just called me asking to borrow $5,000 for emergency flights home, she said, sounding concerned. Is everything all right? She said you're not answering her calls. My heart sank. My mother was now trying to scam my neighbors. Mrs. Winters, please don't send any money. There's been a misunderstanding. My mother isn't stranded. She took money from me without permission and is upset that I froze the account. Oh my, Mrs. Winters replied. She made it sound quite desperate, said Thomas might miss an important exam if they couldn't get home. After reassuring Mrs. Winters and asking her to let me know if my mother contacted her again, I checked social media. My stomach dropped. My mother had posted a lengthy status update. Never thought my own daughter would abandon her family in a foreign place over a misunderstanding. After everything I've sacrificed as a single mother after beating cancer, and just wanting a celebration with my family to be treated this way is heartbreaking. Stranded in Hawaii with no way home. True colors really show in times of crisis. The post already had dozens of sympathetic comments from family members and old friends, all expressing shock at my cruelty and offering financial help. My phone began pinging with messages from relatives I rarely spoke to. How could you do this to your mother? I thought you were raised better than this. She beat cancer, and this is how you thank her. I felt like I was in the Twilight Zone. My mother had stolen a massive amount of money from me, and somehow I was being painted as the villain. The worst part was the cancer claim, which I still couldn't verify. Had she really been sick without telling me? Or was this an elaborate lie to justify the theft and garner sympathy? As the evening progressed, I received voicemails from 2 aunts and an uncle, all berating me for my selfishness and cruelty. No one asked for my side of the story. No one questioned why my mother would need to access my account if this was a planned celebration. They simply accepted her narrative without question. I sat on my couch late into the night feeling more isolated than I ever had before. Even with the evidence of theft clearly documented in my bank statements, I found myself questioning whether I had overreacted. Was I being too harsh? Should I have handled it differently? Then I reminded myself of the facts my mother had taken $17,000 without my knowledge or consent. She had made 5 separate transfers, clearly knowing what she was doing. She had involved Thomas in the deception, having him send misleading texts about a surprise. And now, instead of acknowledging her actions, she was manipulating everyone around us to make me the villain. No, I decided firmly. I hadn't overreacted. If anything, I had been too lenient for too long, enabling behavior that had now escalated to outright theft. The account would remain frozen, and my mother would have to face the consequences of her actions. Little did I know that the worst confrontation was yet to come. 3 days after freezing the account, I received a terse text from my mother. "We're landing at 8:30 p.m. tomorrow. Since you've left us without funds, the least you can do is pick us up from the airport." Despite everything, I agreed to pick them up, partly because I wanted to confront the situation head on, and partly because I didn't want Thomas stranded at the airport due to my mother's actions. The following evening, I arrived at Seattle-Tacoma International Airport 20 minutes early, my stomach in knots. I parked in the short-term lot and waited at the arrivals gate, nervously checking the flight status on my phone every few minutes. When they finally emerged from the secure area, the tension was immediately palpable. My mother's face was set in a cold glare. Richard looked equally furious. Only Thomas had the decency to appear somewhat sheepish, avoiding eye contact as they approached. "Where's the car?" my mother asked without greeting me. "Hello to you too, Mom," I replied, trying to keep my tone neutral. "The car's in the short-term lot. Follow me." The walk to the parking garage was silent and uncomfortable. Once we reached my car, Richard and my mother climbed into the back seat together, leaving Thomas to sit in front with me. As I pulled out of the parking space, my mother finally spoke. "I assume you're taking us to our place?" "Actually, I thought we should go to my apartment first and talk about what happened," I replied, watching her reaction in the rearview mirror. "There's nothing to talk about," she snapped. "You humiliated us and left us stranded. We had to borrow money from Richard's brother to get home." "You stole $17,000 from me," I stated flatly. "I think that warrants a conversation." "I didn't steal anything," she insisted. "I was borrowing it for a family vacation. You were supposed to join us for the last weekend. It was going to be a surprise." I took a deep breath, trying to maintain my composure as I navigated through the airport traffic. "A surprise paid for with my money without my knowledge isn't a gift, Mom. It's theft." "Oh, here we go with the dramatics," Richard interjected. "It's just money. You make plenty of it sitting in your fancy office." His dismissive tone was the final straw. "It's not just money." I exploded, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. "It was my bonus, money I earned working 60-hour weeks for the past year. Money I was saving for a down payment on my first home." "You can save again," my mother said dismissively. "We needed this trip. After everything I've been through." "What exactly have you been through, Mom?" I asked, finally addressing the elephant in the room. "Thomas mentioned something about cancer. Is that true?" From the corner of my eye, I saw Thomas shift uncomfortably in his seat. My mother hesitated just a beat too long before answering. "Yes, it's true. I didn't want to worry you, but I was diagnosed with breast cancer last year. I'm in remission now." This trip was to celebrate. The way she said it with practiced conviction, but avoiding specific details, raised red flags. If she had cancer, why hadn't she told me during our regular calls? Why hadn't she mentioned medical bills or treatments? And why would Thomas know but not me? "When were you diagnosed?" I pressed. "Which hospital did you go to? Who was your oncologist? Why are you interrogating me?" She deflected. "This is exactly why I didn't tell you. You always make everything so difficult with your questions." By the time we reached my apartment, the tension in the car was suffocating. We filed into my small living space in silence. Once inside, Richard immediately made himself comfortable on my couch, while my mother stood with her arms crossed surveying my apartment with a critical eye. "So, this is what you can afford with your big financial advisor salary," she remarked snidely. "Doesn't seem worth all the fuss about money." I ignored the bait. "Let's talk about the $17,000 you took from my account." "Borrowed," she corrected. "I was going to pay you back eventually." "With what money, Mom? You've never paid back any of the loans you've taken from me before." "That's not fair," she protested. "I raised you. Do you know how expensive it is to raise a child? You owe me for all those years of food, clothing, and shelter." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Parents are supposed to provide for their children. That's the basic responsibility you accepted when you had me. It doesn't entitle you to steal my adult earnings. Richard stood up, pointing a finger at me. "You ungrateful little brat. Your mother sacrificed everything for you, and this is how you repay her, by bean counting every dollar." "Stay out of this, Richard," I warned. "This isn't about you." "It became about me when you stranded us in Hawaii," he shot back. "Do you have any idea how embarrassing it was having our car declined at that resort? They nearly called security." "Maybe you should have thought about that before spending money that wasn't yours," I replied. My mother turned to Thomas, who had been standing quietly in the corner. "Thomas, tell your sister about how upset you were when we couldn't take that sailing trip we had booked because she froze the account." Thomas looked trapped. I I thought you had permission to use the money," he admitted quietly. "You told me Chelsea knew about it and was okay with us going ahead without her." My mother's face darkened. "Of course she knew. Why else would I have access to her account?" "You didn't have access to my personal account," I clarified. "You somehow got my password and made unauthorized transfers to our joint account. That's not the same thing." "It's all semantics," my mother dismissed with a wave of her hand. "Family money is family money." "No, it's not," I insisted. "I worked for every dollar in that account. I put myself through college working 3 jobs. I built my career from nothing. That money represents years of sacrifice and hard work." "And what do you think raising you was?" she countered. "You think that wasn't sacrifice, hard work? You have no idea what I gave up for you kids." "So that entitles you to steal from me?" I asked incredulously. "I wasn't stealing," she shouted, finally losing her composure. "I was taking what I deserve after everything I've done, after all the thankless years of motherhood. Is it so wrong to want a nice vacation, to celebrate being cancer-free?" "About that," I said, my voice suddenly quiet. "I called Aunt Sarah yesterday. She had no idea you'd been sick. Neither did Grandma. Isn't it strange that no one in the family knew about this cancer diagnosis except Thomas?" The color drained from my mother's face. "I didn't want to worry everyone," she stammered. "Mom," Thomas interjected, looking confused. "You told me Chelsea knew about the diagnosis. You said she was too busy with work to come to your treatments." The pieces finally clicked into place. My mother had been lying to everyone, creating different narratives for different people to justify her actions and manipulate us all. "There was no cancer, was there?" I asked softly. My mother's face contorted with anger. "How dare you? Of course there was. Fine, prove it," I challenged. "Show me a single medical record, a doctor's name, anything." When she couldn't produce any evidence, Thomas looked devastated. "You lied to me about having cancer." Richard stepped in. "Your mother doesn't have to prove anything to you ungrateful children. This stress isn't good for her recovery." "Recovery from what, Richard?" I asked pointedly. "There was no cancer, just like there was no emergency when she took my $2,000 for car repairs and spent it on a spa weekend with you. Just like there was no need for the $5,000 she borrowed for Thomas's school expenses that mysteriously disappeared." My mother's face hardened. "I don't have to listen to this. We're leaving. Thomas, come on." But Thomas didn't move. "I want to know the truth, Mom. Did you really lie about having cancer?" Her silence was answer enough. "In my account," I continued, laying out the facts clearly, "you took $17,000 without my permission. That's not borrowing. That's theft. I have 2 options here. You can agree to a formal repayment plan, or I can file charges for unauthorized access to my accounts and theft." "You wouldn't dare," my mother hissed. "Your own mother?" "Try me." I replied steadily. Family doesn't steal from family. You've left me no choice. As the reality of her situation sank in, my mother's demeanor changed. The righteous indignation gave way to tears. I can't believe you would threaten me with legal action, she sobbed. After everything I've done for you, I just wanted a nice vacation. Is that so wrong? Not if you pay for it yourself, I responded. I'll have a repayment agreement drawn up tomorrow, monthly payments until the full $17,000 is returned. That's ridiculous, Richard interjected. She doesn't have that kind of money. She had enough to book a luxury Hawaiian vacation, I pointed out. She can find enough to repay what she took. My mother's tears suddenly dried up, replaced by cold fury. You'll regret this, Chelsea. Family is supposed to help each other, not bean count every dollar. I agree, I replied calmly. And I've helped you many times over the years. But this crossed a line and you know it. With that, my mother grabbed her purse and stormed toward the door. Come on, Richard. Thomas, we're leaving. Richard followed immediately, but Thomas hesitated. I think I'm going to stay and talk to Chelsea a bit longer, he said quietly. My mother looked betrayed. Fine, take her side. See if she helps you when you need it. With that, she and Richard left, slamming the door behind them and leaving me and Thomas in stunned silence. The apartment felt eerily quiet after my mother and Richard left. Thomas sat on my couch looking shell-shocked while I made us both cups of tea, my hands still trembling slightly from the confrontation. I had no idea, Thomas said, finally accepting the mug I handed him. She told me you knew about everything, the cancer, the trip, all of it. She said you were too busy to join us until the last weekend. I sat beside him with a heavy sigh. She's been manipulating both of us, telling each of us different stories. I feel so stupid, he admitted, staring into his tea. Looking back, there were so many signs. She never showed me any medical records or let me come to appointments. She said she didn't want me to see her that way, and I believed her. It's not your fault, I assured him. Mom has always been good at creating narratives that serve her purposes. She's been doing it since we were kids. That night, Thomas slept on my couch, and we stayed up late talking about our childhood and the patterns we hadn't recognized until now. It was the most honest conversation we'd ever had about our mother. The next morning, after Thomas left to pick up some clothes from my mother's house, I broke down completely. All the emotions I'd been holding in check during the confrontation came pouring out. I sobbed until I felt physically ill, mourning not just the loss of my savings, but the relationship with my mother I'd always hoped we might someday have. Later that week, I had my first appointment with a therapist, Dr. Marshall, whom my health insurance covered. I hadn't planned to seek therapy, but after 3 nights of insomnia and anxiety attacks, I knew I needed professional help processing what had happened. What you're describing is financial abuse, Dr. Marshall explained during our first session. It's particularly complicated when it comes from a parent, someone who should be protecting you rather than exploiting you. I keep wondering if I overreacted, I admitted. Maybe I should have just let it go. It's just money, right? It's not just money, she corrected gently. It's a profound breach of trust, and it's not the first time from what you've described. This pattern has been ongoing throughout your life. Over the following weeks, Dr. Marshall helped me understand that my mother's behavior reflected her issues, not my worth as a daughter. We worked through the guilt I felt about freezing the account and the confusing mix of anger and love I still felt toward my mother. Meanwhile, I took practical steps to protect myself financially. I filed an official police report documenting the unauthorized access to my accounts, not pressing charges yet, but creating an official record of what happened. The officer who took my statement was sympathetic, but blunt. Unfortunately, we see this kind of family financial abuse quite often, he said. Most people don't report it because of shame or family loyalty, which only enables it to continue. I changed all my passwords and security questions and closed the joint account permanently. The bank helped me set up additional security measures on my personal accounts, including 2-factor authentication and alerts for any transfers over $500. I also consulted with a lawyer, Mr. Patel, about my options for recovering the money. He recommended drafting a formal repayment agreement rather than immediately pursuing legal action. Court should be a last resort with family matters, he advised. It's expensive, time-consuming, and permanently damages relationships. Let's try the repayment agreement first. He drafted a simple but legally binding document requiring my mother to repay the full $17,000 over 3 years with modest monthly payments. It included consequences for missed payments, including the option to pursue legal action. When I sent the agreement to my mother, her response was predictably dramatic. She called alternating between tears and accusations. "You're really going through with this?" she asked incredulously. "Getting lawyers involved against your own mother?" "I didn't want to," I replied truthfully. "But I need to protect myself and I need that money back." "I can't afford these payments," she protested. "The monthly amount is less than what you spent on that helicopter tour in Hawaii," I pointed out. "You found money for that." Eventually, after realizing I wouldn't back down, she reluctantly signed the agreement. Whether she would actually make the payments remained to be seen. Throughout this difficult period, my mother continued her campaign to paint me as the villain. She told extended family members and old friends that I was being cruel and money-obsessed, that I didn't care about her recovery from an illness I now knew was fabricated. Some believed her. Several relatives stopped speaking to me entirely. What surprised me, however, was the unexpected support that emerged. My Aunt Sarah, my mother's sister, who had always been somewhat distant, reached out with an unexpected phone call. "Chelsea, I want you to know I don't believe Janet's version of events," she said without preamble. "She's done similar things to me over the years, taking money, making up emergencies, even lying about medical issues." Aunt Sarah shared stories about my mother that mirrored my own experiences, helping me realize that this pattern of behavior extended beyond her relationship with me. It wasn't my fault, and it wasn't something I could have prevented. Thomas, too, began to see our mother more clearly. After the initial shock wore off, he started noticing manipulative patterns in her behavior that he'd previously overlooked. He moved out of her house into a small apartment with a roommate, asking me to help him learn basic financial management. "I don't want to end up like Mom," he told me one evening as we reviewed his first real budget together. "Always scrambling, always in crisis, always taking from others." As weeks turned into months, I maintained minimal contact with my mother. Our interactions were limited to brief conversations about the repayment plan. It hurt, but I knew maintaining strong boundaries was necessary for my well-being. Richard continued to be hostile whenever we crossed paths, blaming me for tearing the family apart over money. I learned to simply walk away from these confrontations, recognizing that engaging only fueled the drama. The most difficult part was the ongoing anxiety I felt around financial security. Despite the measures I'd put in place to protect my accounts, I found myself checking my balances obsessively, sometimes multiple times a day. Dr. Marshall helped me recognize this as a trauma response and develop healthier habits. 6 months after the Hawaii incident, I finally felt stable enough to restart my home search, though, with a significantly smaller down payment than I'd planned. The theft had set my plans back considerably, but I was determined not to let it derail my future entirely. Through it all, I kept reminding myself of what Dr. Marshall had told me. Setting boundaries isn't abandoning family. It's creating the conditions under which healthier relationships might someday be possible. I wasn't sure if a healthy relationship with my mother would ever be possible, but I knew that enabling her behavior certainly wouldn't help either of us in the long run. 6 months had passed since that explosive confrontation in my apartment. Fall had given way to winter, and winter to spring. Cherry blossoms now lined my street, a reminder that even after the harshest seasons, renewal is possible. My mother had surprisingly adhered to the repayment agreement, though not without constant complaints about the financial strain. Each month, the money would appear in my account just before the deadline, accompanied by a text message about how difficult it was for her to make the payment. I had learned to simply respond with a neutral "thank you for the payment," rather than engaging with the guilt trips. In a significant step toward independence, Thomas had moved not just out of our mother's house, but into his own studio apartment. He'd gotten a job at a local tech company in their customer service department and had enrolled in community college part-time. "I want to understand money better," he told me during one of our weekly dinners. "Not just how to make it, but how it works in the bigger picture." I couldn't have been prouder of his growth. At 20, he was showing more financial maturity than our mother had demonstrated in her entire life. "I've been thinking about something," Thomas said one evening as we washed dishes together after dinner. Do you think Mom's behavior with money is because of how Grandpa raised her? Remember how he used to surprise Grandma with expensive gifts they couldn't afford? I considered this. It's possible. Grandpa definitely modeled unsustainable spending habits. But at some point, adults have to take responsibility for their own choices, regardless of how they were raised. Like we're doing, Thomas noted. Exactly like we're doing. I agreed, feeling a swell of pride in both of us. My professional life had taken an unexpected turn in the aftermath of the Hawaii incident. I had begun specializing in clients who were recovering from financial abuse or fraud, particularly women emerging from relationships where money had been used as a control mechanism. My personal experience had given me insights that my education alone couldn't provide. You have a way of explaining financial concepts that makes people feel understood, not judged, my supervisor commented during my performance review. Clients connect with you on a deeper level. I had also started volunteering once a month at a women's shelter, providing basic financial literacy workshops. Helping others regain control of their financial lives had become a form of healing for me. Despite the significant setback to my savings, I had managed to purchase a small condo in a more affordable suburb of Seattle. It wasn't the home I had originally envisioned, but as I unpacked boxes in my very own space, I felt a profound sense of accomplishment. This was mine earned through my hard work and protected by the boundaries I'd learned to establish. My relationship with my mother remained complicated. We spoke sporadically, usually about practical matters related to the repayment plan. She had made several attempts to return to our old dynamics, calling with emergencies that always seemed to involve requests for money, but I had held firm to my boundaries. I'm happy to offer advice or emotional support, I would tell her, but I won't be providing financial assistance beyond what we've already agreed to. This clear boundary had led to several weeks of silence each time, but eventually she would call again, testing to see if my resolve had weakened. It never did. Richard was no longer in the picture. According to Thomas, he had left my mother after she refused to take out a loan to fund his latest business venture. I wasn't surprised. Men like Richard tended to disappear when the financial well ran dry. The most unexpected development came from my Aunt Sarah, who had become something of a mentor to me. Having recognized and addressed similar patterns in her relationship with my mother years earlier, she offered guidance based on her experiences. Janet has always used money as a way to create dependence, she explained during one of our lunch meetings. When we were girls, she would borrow my allowance, then hold it over my head when I needed something from her. It took me years to recognize the pattern. Through these conversations, I gained a deeper understanding of my mother's behavior without excusing it. There was something liberating about seeing the bigger picture, recognizing that her actions reflected long-established patterns, rather than a specific rejection of me. The support group I had joined for survivors of financial abuse had become an important part of my life. Initially, I had felt almost fraudulent attending questioning, whether what I had experienced counted as abuse. But as I listened to others' stories, I recognized the same patterns of manipulation, gaslighting, and boundary violations that had characterized my relationship with my mother. Eventually, I began facilitating some of the group sessions, sharing my journey from enablement to boundaries. Financial boundaries aren't about being selfish or materialistic. I would explain, they're about self-respect and creating the foundation for healthy relationships. As spring progressed towards summer, I received an unexpected letter from my mother. Unlike her usual communications, this one contained no complaints about the repayment plan, no veiled accusations, no attempts to make me feel guilty. Instead, it was a handwritten note that simply said, "Chelsea, I've been attending a financial management course at the community center. It's making me realize some things about my behavior with money. I'm not asking for forgiveness yet, just letting you know I'm trying to understand. Mom." It wasn't an apology, and it didn't erase the years of financial exploitation. But it was a glimmer of self-awareness that I hadn't seen before. I chose to view it with cautious optimism rather than immediate trust. The journey toward healing my relationship with money continued daily. I still had moments of anxiety when checking my accounts, still felt a surge of panic when seeing an unexpected transaction. But these reactions were becoming less frequent, less intense. Marshall had helped me recognize that financial security wasn't just about the numbers in my accounts, but about trusting my ability to handle whatever came my way. Resilience isn't about avoiding hardship, she reminded me. It's about knowing you can face it and emerge stronger. And I had emerged stronger. Despite losing $17,000, despite the betrayal by someone who should have protected me, despite the family fractures that followed, I had rebuilt my security on a stronger foundation. One with clear boundaries, better protection, and a deeper understanding of both my worth and my values. As I sat on the small balcony of my new condo that evening, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold, I reflected on the most important lesson I had learned through this painful experience. Financial independence isn't just about having money. It's about having the courage to protect that money even from the people you love when necessary. Sometimes the hardest boundaries to set are the ones that ultimately allow the healthiest relationships to grow. And sometimes the people who should support you the most are the ones who test your boundaries the most severely. I didn't know what the future held for my relationship with my mother. Healing would require genuine acknowledgement and change on her part, not just words on paper or temporary behavior modifications. But I knew with certainty who I was and what I deserved, and that knowledge would guide me through whatever came next. How do you handle financial boundaries with your family? Have you ever had to make a difficult decision to protect yourself financially from someone you love? Drop a comment below sharing your experience. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Remember, setting healthy boundaries isn't selfish. It's necessary for your well-being and the health of your relationships. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it helps you navigate your own financial journey with courage and clarity.